are so many conversations right now around like, oh my gosh, like how do you prepare for a really bad economy or a recession or this or whatever? And I feel like what happens is that there's like two extremes in these types of conversations. There's like the panic preps, who are like panic, 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 prep, prep, prep. And there are the like pretend nothing bad could ever happen to you thing, right? And if you guys know me, if you know anything about me, I almost always, always, always live in the middle ground. And that's going to be a bit of what today's conversation is about. I absolutely do not believe in like this full out panic or this need to like over prepare and anticipate every move and whatever, which by the way, like does not work most of the time, in my opinion. And I equally don't agree with this idea of like pretend nothing could ever happen. Like, yes, you can influence things with how you show up in your energy and your belief system behind it, but not preparing your business in any real way or acting like nothing bad could ever happen to you, I think is just not being a strategic CEO either. And so I really feel like there is this middle ground that if we all lean into, we would feel much better. We would feel much more prepared. We would actually feel like we could handle this. So we're going to get into that. Hey, Allison. Good. I'm so glad this is going to be helpful to y'all. I have been thinking about this a lot recently and talking to clients about it too. And so I was like, I just feel like this is an important conversation to have. Like, let's do stuff and let's not also make ourselves insane in the process and do a bunch of stuff that doesn't even help us. You know what I mean? Um, so I feel like on the panic prep side, it's usually like build huge savings, cut expenses, work more. So let's just talk about that for a second. And then I want to talk about the other side, and then we'll kind of talk about like what I really believe here. It never hurts to be looking at expenses repeatedly in your business. It never hurts to have a robust business savings account that could float your business for 3 to 6 months if you needed to. Like, those are just smart things to have. Do you know what I mean? Like, we should be looking at our expenses regularly because it's a good business tool to be looking at our expenses. So when I hear people talking about them in this, like, this is how you prepare kind of way, I think what gets really hard about that is that it feels like those are such a negative. Those are such like a harbinger of like, devastation or something like that, instead of being like, well, yeah, like, let's just kind of look at our business expenses from time to time. Oh yeah, let's like have a savings goal in our business. Like, those things are just good business practice. And so if you feel like a negative time or, like people being like really like pessimistic about something is making you do those things, what I would suggest there is like, don't panic, do those things. Think about, oh yeah, how can I build into my routine looking at my expenses? More frequently. Like, I typically do that twice a year myself. Like, about twice a year I go through and I'm like, what is everything we're spending on right now? And does that still make sense? I usually do it around now, and I usually do it at the end of the year. That's it. And each time takes me like an hour, right? Because I do it regularly, because it's just kind of like a normal practice in my business. And so I'm not saying don't do those things. I'm just saying don't do those things from panic. Don't feel like, oh my gosh, now I must be really good about my expenses. Like, how about always we're looking at our expenses and what makes a difference, and not to feel like all of this like anticipatory, like, oh my God, things are going to get bad. I have to hoard. Like, even in good times, even when things are totally flush, like, let's be looking at our expenses, right? Um, so that part feels important because I think the energy behind it does actually matter when it comes with all of this intensity of like, okay, now I have to like cut everything. And yes, this thing is really helping in my business, but I actually shouldn't even have that at all. Like, it makes you make bad decisions, I guess, is what I want to say. Like, I remember having this conversation with a client, and it was like something that was like $20 a month. And she was like, okay, but like maybe I just shouldn't. Da, 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 da. And I was like, then you're just not doing this from the right place. Like, you can afford $20 a month, like completely, completely fine. So you're not in the right headspace to be doing this if you feel like you need to be saving every single cent, even if something's helping you considerably. Like, you're doing this from the wrong energy in the wrong place. You're not thinking like a CEO. You're thinking you have to cut everything and save every single dollar because what if something bad happens? And like, that's my point here is That's not how we should be approaching these things. We should just be like, this is a regular thing I do, and I don't have the pressure to do that all the time. Yeah, Melissa and Allison said same couple times a year. Hey, Linz. Right. So that's good. And then you're less likely to approach it with so much intensity. Same with a business savings goal or whatever. If all of a sudden you feel like you have to go from no savings to like 6 months of business savings, you're gonna approach it in the total wrong way with like so much intensity, so much fear. That's what we're trying to stay away from, right? On the flip side, it's almost that version of like stay so delusional that you can never imagine anything going wrong or like make your own economy or like all of that kind of stuff. And I find like a very similar thing is true here. Like we should always be working on having a strong, resilient mindset in our business, deciding that we are able to trust ourselves to make anything work, that, like we can show up and we will handle things. If you are waiting to try to build a strong mindset until you think shit is bad, that's never good. That level of like delusion then is not actually a helpful mindset tool. It's you tapping out of reality, is what it is, right? Versus if you're constantly working on that mindset, good times, bad times, in between, you just have a solid mindset versus you're like, oh my God, things are bad. Like, let me totally check out. That is not the answer. Right? Like a great CEO does not check out when things get hard. They don't put their head in the sand. They don't act like this isn't happening. I mean, I can think of so many businesses that I like studied in business school where that's basically what they did is they were like, we're untouchable, like Blockbuster, we're untouchable. Let's put our head in the sand. Like nobody is going to ever affect us. Not true. Right? That level of delusion isn't that helpful again, especially when it's in reaction to something. So you can kind of sense a theme here, which is like being in reaction of like, oh my God, this, and now I have to make this huge move is typically what's working against us. Like, yes, have your savings goal, have your mindset work, like do all of that consistently. So you'll be in a good place to do the next thing, which is what I really believe is going to make a difference. And what I think is going to make the biggest difference that will always be your best friend, that will always future proof your business, that is always the thing to keep coming back to, is create the time and spaciousness and mental bandwidth and whatever. Create an overflow of that in your business so that if and when it's time to adapt, you have the space, time, and mental energy to do it. Because I promise you, you are always going to have to adapt in the online space, right? In the, economy, whatever. You are not going to be in business long term and not have that. I've been in this industry for almost 10 years, probably 10 years next month. And I've seen so much stuff come and go, so many adaptations needed. I've been in it through like strong economies and more difficult economies and all of these scenarios, right? COVID, et cetera. And what is consistent is you have to be willing to adapt. And where most people fuck themselves isn't that they like didn't build up this savings account or that they didn't check their expenses enough. It's that they didn't build in any margin so that when it is time to adapt, they can't do it. They put their head in the sand or they are so overwhelmed by it, they don't make good decisions around it. Like it is that simple. It really is. If you know you have bandwidth, and again, I'm talking mental, emotional, time-wise, etc., team-wise, to adapt when needed, you know that you're in a good spot in business. What happens is most people don't have that built in. And so then something happens where they need to adapt, and their response is to be fucking mad. They're so mad that they have to adapt. They're so mad that things have changed. They're so bitter that it can't just keep working the way it's worked. And if there's one thing that ruins businesses the most in seasons like this, it's that, right? It's being like, I shouldn't have to. I'm so mad about this. I'm just pretending this isn't happening to me and I'm putting my head in the sand and it better work out for me. When we have that mindset of like, we should get to a point where we're untouchable and nothing, no shift, no economy could ever touch us, we've absolutely missed the point. and we're making business an ego game instead of a business game, right? The ego game is like, I shouldn't have to. How dare they? How dare my clients change their preferences or whatever that is, right? Like that irritation, anger, frustration, whatever. I'm not saying you can't feel it or that it's not even justified. I mean, sometimes it is super fucking annoying to have to adapt. Like I will 100% put my hand up at that. But if that becomes like, whatever, if that's like a few hours of feeling something, feel your feels all day, every day. But if that's a few days and a few weeks, so much so that you get in this pattern of like not shifting when your business is telling you to shift, when your audience is telling you to shift, when your data is telling you to shift, that's when you're in real trouble. Because the adaptation is what keeps things going. It's what creates empires. It's what walks you through a difficult economy. It's all of those things. I actually recently like wrote a post about like the 6 um eras I've seen in the online business in the 10 years I've been in business. And 6 and 10 years is no joke. That's like less than every 2 years. And I was actually looking at Taylor Swift in her eras, and I was like, hers are less than every 2 years too. Like you cannot get so complacent that you do not think that every year or two you're gonna have to make some shifts. And so if you don't have bandwidth built in for that, again, for you, for your team, et cetera, which we'll get into the specifics of, that's what is going to be bad. What future proofs your business is being like, I know adaptation is part of the game. So, how do I make that part of my strategy? How do I build a plan that I know I can shift around? What a lot of people do, I think, especially much further along in business, is they get so rigid with their planning. They're like, but we always launch in March and we always do this and it's always this way and we always do this challenge and we always, right? And then the idea of changing it, they get so mad or so frustrated or so overwhelmed by, right? That they don't actually get to make the space for what could support them so much more. Megan says, I think the other side of that coin, frustration and annoyed about having to change, is a certain type of grief with letting go to make that change adjustment. And still totally agree with you that we have to adapt. Yeah. Like you could have a million feels around that, right? Grief, frustration, anger, etc. Like absolutely. And all of those are valid. I'm not saying don't feel them, right? And I know you aren't either, Megan. That's not the point. But like what I'm saying is they will eat you alive if you don't have the space to do both, right? Like if you can't be like, I can feel my feels and I can show up as the CEO who's ready to adapt. I have space to be able to process this emotion and not let this emotion take over so much that I can't make the changes that are necessary, right? Emily says totally, and lack of confidence too. Yeah, right. That's for sure. And I also think sometimes lack of confidence is tied to the piece of like, I didn't set up space for myself or didn't create margin for myself to adapt. So I'm lacking confidence in my ability to even do that, right? Exactly. Allison said it's the rigidity that gets people in trouble. Yes, feel your feels, then take steps aligned with your values is all that matters, Rebecca said. Yes, totally. So that's what we're saying, right? Like feel all of it, like whether it's like intense grief or frustration or any of those things, like, Emily's saying lack of confidence. Absolutely. And that has to coexist with the space to move forward. And a lot of people have not built in enough margin in their life and business for both to exist together. And that's the real, like, kind of difference maker, I think, in terms of like what allows you to future proof yourself. Like, are you like, okay, if shit like really went down tomorrow and something massive changed in our space, um, could I like do something about that? Like, do I have the margin in my day? Do I have the right team to support me in that? Do I have like, um, like clear, I don't want to say departments because I mean, like obviously sometimes that's true, but I mean that might not be true for like most people in our space. Do I have like clear funnels in terms of not like how people are coming in, but like in terms of how I disseminate information to my team? Like, would I be able to go to this person and be like, hey, we're changing this. Hey, we're gonna lean into this. Hey, da-da. Like, do I know how that would work? I don't have to know what I would do right now. That's actually not the point. And again, I think that's what is hard for most people is they want to know, but what would I change? And it's like, it doesn't matter. You have to wait and see. But what you have to know is that you could change, right? Like you have to know that if the time came, you would be able to do that instead of the opposite, which is like, I have to know what the thing is so I can plan for it right now. You don't, unfortunately. You have to do the really, 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 really uncomfortable thing for a lot of us humans, which is be able to surrender to the fact that you might not know until you know. You know what I mean? Like you might not know what has to change until something really happens on like a larger scale that requires that shift from you. Yeah, Megan said spot on. Thank you for naming this nuance. Absolutely. Emily said, can you speak to the opposite too? Like, I feel like sometimes I'm changing too much too soon, like too adaptable, but also just don't know if that's the natural evolution of my business versus holding on to the same model that may not be working anymore. I think this is a really important question because I think there's always like nuance to this of like, are we changing because we have data that says things really do need to change right now? Or are we changing because, excuse me, it feels almost safer to keep changing? Like, okay, well, maybe I should try this. And then also I should try this. And all it's almost that like wanting to know versus knowing. So that's how I would think about it. Like, are you kind of in a place of like, oh, I just wish I could find this thing. Like, I want to know, I want to know, I want to know. And so you're changing a ton to see if you can find that thing. Or are you like, I know, like, I know this is more in alignment with my business. I know the data is saying this. I know my audience is blah, 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 blah. Right. Like that. I mean, I'm not saying that's always an easy discernment to make, but I think that's part of it. So it's like, if we talk about, like let's say when COVID happened, right? Nobody really knew how that would affect the online space. Like we didn't know how that would affect the economy, et cetera. And so I feel like at that time it was really like obvious that we were probably going to have to make some adaptations, but like we kind of had to do it without like knowing for sure. And so sometimes you have to lean in without like knowing for sure. But what we knew for sure was like, we need to be talking about this. A different message needs to be happening. We can't pretend it's business as usual. We have to lean into this. So pick the thing you know for sure and go with that. Does that make sense? So with like the COVID thing, it's like, what I know for sure is like everybody's freaking out about this. Everybody's talking about this. Like you cannot possibly have a business thought that exists outside of what's happening in our world. Like what I know for sure is I have to talk about that with my audience, right? The rest, like, do I have to change my business model? Are people going to spend less? Are people going to spend more? I would wait till I knew the next thing for sure of like, oh, okay, well, I've just been on 8 sales calls and got more money objections than I've ever gotten. Okay, now I know for sure that I actually might need to change something else, but like let yourself wait. Like you can do one, I know for sure at a time. And so that might be exactly what you're doing, Emily. And it feels like you're changing a lot, but actually that's just you like riding the wave and learning. Um, but I do think feeling like you have to know all of it for sure, or feeling like you shouldn't know any of it for sure, like those are the two extremes that make it hard to live in. So I have to know all of it for sure. Well, that's impossible. We can't move from that place because we can't, right? Versus like, I don't know anything for sure. Well, that's not true either. Like you have a business, you have an audience, you have data that's coming in. Like there are some things you know for sure. So I think it's like finding that middle ground. Yeah, I love that. What do I know for sure? Yeah, Megan says this is an Enneagram 5. I need to know all the things. I get that. Um, Often I don't find out until after I make the change. Yeah, and I think that might be the like you make a change and then you like find out something else for sure and then you move from that place. But as long as you're in that place of like, I know one thing for sure, I know this thing for sure, that's really powerful. Like I think that that can be our guiding light almost always. And so that might look like 5 adaptations in 1 year and it might look like 1 over 2 years, but like there will be an obvious piece there if we let it be obvious and simple, you know. Can you speak to navigating income dips in those periods of adapting? Yeah, I think like what I would say to that is talking about margin. I think margin also includes income. I think if someone is living at the absolute highest end of what their business makes, margin also doesn't exist there. So when I talk about have margin in your time, in your team, in your energy, also in your finances, um, I know this is easier said than done sometimes, but right, like don't invest in your business way, way, way past that because you don't have margin then. Personally, for me, that's one of the reasons I love the partnership model for clients is because technically margin is always built in because if they have a lower month, payment goes down, et cetera. But sometimes I think we get so like I'm at the top end of my comfort level. And typically that's not always great for adaptation because you don't feel like you can. Because you're like, I cannot take even the smallest income dip right now because of X. Well, that is the time where you're not like slashing expenses or investments just for the sake of reactivity, but you're going, hey, I want margin built in. If I know I need a 3 month runway and adaptation, I want to feel like I can have that. Same thing with savings. Like you're not trying to save in this super reactive, oh my God, everything's going to crash down way, but you're doing it in a I have margin kind of way. Because I think that's true. I think it's very frequent over the course of a business journey where we're like, well, this decision is going to temporarily hit my income for X period of time until Y thing takes it over. Can I sustain that? And if you don't have a business where you can sustain some of those shifts, it's going to feel a lot more tumultuous and it's going to feel like you're trapped a little bit. Um, that like, oh, but I can't versus being like, I'm going to set up a business where the answer is I can. It doesn't mean, and also then the second part of that is we have to be willing to let go of that idea that like, our revenue defines our kind of like success. Meaning, I feel like some people are like, well, I always make X a month and I never, ever, ever want to make lower than that because I never want anyone to know I made lower than that. Or like, oh my God, am I a fraud if I say that I usually make X and then for 2 months I made Y? Or like, we have all this stuff that typically gets wrapped up in the money and the income and what that means. And for periods of adapting, that's what we have to let go of like, I don't have to make this mean anything about me or my business, except that like sometimes adaptation requires shifts like that. I don't have to make this mean anything about like me or my ultimate success, except that like I'm really happy that I built a business that has margin for me to do this. Um, and I think that's really important because I feel like sometimes again, it's like the ego thing comes in so hard, or even like the pressure from the online space of like, you know, if your mindset is really good, you'll never ever have a dip or blah, 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 like all this stuff that tells us like we're not good enough if we ever saw a dip or a shift, when really a lot of businesses that are willing to take the dip or shift sometimes in order to adapt to what they know for sure with their data and what the market is telling them, like they are the best businesses that are the most primed to make it through difficult times and that are the most primed for growth during difficult times because they're willing to do that and they're not so stuck in it has to be this way, it has to look this way, I have to do X to prove myself, that they can't make shifts there. Um, Allison said, yes, exactly. Having margins gives us the flexibility to adapt. Right. And that's the point is like, if you have the ability to adapt, what's not important is what it has to be right now. You might not know till you know. But if you don't have that, if you're actually at the top end of your time and the top end of your team usage and the top end of your investments and like the tippy top end of everything, when something needs to adapt, you are going to feel absolutely pummeled with it. Like you're going to feel so stressed. You're going to feel so overwhelmed. And so that's kind of the point for times like this is it's not like assume doom and gloom, like at all. It's assume things are going to change because they fucking always do. Um, are you built for that? Is your business built for that? Are you set up for that? And I feel like when that happens, that's when we let go of some of that other stuff. Like, not that the grief ever goes away or the frustration or the whatever, but it's more like, oh yeah, like this is how this goes. And it feels normal versus like, I cannot believe this is happening to me. Um, or I must be wrong that this is happening to me, or I'm somehow getting screwed that this is happening to me, or like whatever, like, anyone's personal narrative is there. It's like, oh yeah, well, I'm in business, so I'm going to have to be adaptable and change. And here's the really important part. As a small business owner, one of your most incredible opportunities is how fast and easy you can adapt. I talk about this all the time, but it's like if you're a huge business, that level of adaptability to market change is like turning the Titanic, you know? If you're a small business, and especially if you've built in margin, and especially if you've had conversations with yourself or your team or whatever of like, okay, when things adapt, here's what I do, here's how I think about it, here's how I shift. Um, that's when things get really good, you know? Uh, because it's your strength and you're utilizing that strength. Like the strength of being a small business with a smaller team is adaptability. And so if you don't use that strength or play to that strength, you're working against yourself fully, right? Like most big businesses would not be like, well, our biggest strength is how quickly we can adapt. Like a lot of them don't have that. So they have to use other strengths, right? But as a small business, like that's typically true. Like one of our biggest strengths is how quickly we can move things and make shit happen and, you know, turn when we need to turn. And so you want to feel like you're set up to utilize that strength, right? Like you have the margin to utilize that strength. Like you're seeing that as a positive thing or a natural progression of business instead of something that suggests we've like gone in the wrong direction or we've built the wrong business. You know, I feel like so often what happens with people is they'll like something will happen where things are changing and then they'll go, oh my gosh, this means I built the wrong business. And like they've been in business for 6 years or something like that. And it's like, no, you didn't build the wrong business. Like you can't build a business from day one knowing what's going to happen in year 6 or year 10 or year 12. Like you have to build the business for what's in front of you and then keep being willing to build and adjust as it goes on. And I think that this is the time where a lot of businesses stay in it or are weeded out because that's really what it comes down to is do you want to ride those waves? And I think some people are like, no, and that's okay. Like, not everyone's meant to be an entrepreneur, but I think a lot of people leave our industry during times like these because they're like, actually, if that's what it takes, if I have to be adaptable and I have to change things and I can't just build it once, set it and forget it, I don't want this. That's totally okay. Like, there's not a right or wrong there, but like, know if that's what you want or not, right? And then if you're over here and you're like, I mean, yeah, this is what I want. I want to be in business for myself for years and years and years to come. I want to be able to ride out different market conditions. I want to believe that like I can show up and figure shit out and adapt. Then great, set yourself up for that. Make that right. Make your margins a part of your planning and how you're thinking about your business and your life, right? If if that is what you want and it's not part of what you're planning for or what you're making important, then you're just working against yourself like anything else, right? Like if you know you want something, you want to plan for it, you want to like engage with it, you want to look forward to it, right? Thank you, Alyssa. So, I mean, that's pretty much the gist for me. I think you guys get what I mean. The entire point is the strategic shift is build margin. And that's true whether we're in like an absolute boom or an absolute bust, right? Because if shit is exploding, like this is a good example, like, you know, post or I guess during slash after that like initial stuff with COVID, like the online space went through such a huge period of growth. And if you didn't have margin built in, you almost couldn't take advantage of that growth, right? You were like, but I'm already totally capped and my team is totally capped and we just don't have the flexibility to like do this thing or make big changes. And so you're not getting to take advantage of like all of this huge influx that's happening in the market. Same thing's going to be true in a down market. Like you still are going to want margin built in to shift and pivot to whatever is necessary there. And so this is not the point of, oh my God, if we go into a recession or not. It's like, what does it look like to future proof your business for the really good times, the hard times, whatever, because both are coming if you're staying in this for any period of time. And it is just simply lying to yourself if you pretend like both aren't coming. Um, they are. It's really like, do you trust yourself in your business to weather those storms? What helps you trust yourself in your business to weather those storms is you having personal margin in order to do that, and your business having strategic and financial margin in order to do that. Like, that's it. If you set yourself up for that, you're going to feel like I can handle what's coming, even if I don't know exactly what that is, whether it's like amazing or difficult or whatever. If you do not feel well set up for that, I could tell you the online space is going to triple tomorrow and you would be like, oh, that sounds overwhelming. You wouldn't be like, that's so exciting. You know what I mean? You would still be like, ooh, oh no, that's a lot, right? Because you're at the top of your margin. So I hope that helps. I hope this is like a balanced, easy way to think about it. This isn't something you need to go be reactive to or run out and change tomorrow. And it's not something where you need to be able to predict the future and know everything. What you can predict is the only thing that's going to help you no matter what happens in the future is having the margin to adapt to it, having the, space to handle it. So I hope that's just good perspective. I hope that it reminds you and grounds you that like you don't have to be a fortune teller. You don't have to know everything. You don't have to like hire 5 more team members, and like have them on wait just in case, etc. You don't have to cut all of your expenses. Like this is not that. Like you just have to have a plan to build in this much more margin. And you're probably going to feel so much more grounded, so much more solid, and so much more ready to take on whatever's next, good or bad. So I love you guys. I thank you so much for being here. As always, I hope that is supportive and I look forward to seeing y'all next week. Bye, guys.